This is Danya Craddock. I am the host of DocLive.tv. We are here for you each and every week. This year, well, up until June, we are focused on FIFA World Cup 2026. We are going to the road to the war of the World Cup. I have been with you every other week, weekly, with special guests talking about the World Cup. But before I jump in and share my guests, please share DocLive.tv. We want our audience to come in, chime in. There's so much going on in the world of soccer, and we will. Okay, you guys, I'm going to fix it because I know I have fans out there that want me to use the word football, and I actually have a display at the Doc Bookshop that says football, and people are very proud of that. So if I go back and forth between the conversation, because I know this program is international, like, wow, I'm international, but I do want to be respectful. Like most of the world call what we call soccer in America, they call it football. So we're going to be respectful. Y'all don't send me a whole bunch of text posts about I actually use football or I actually use soccer. We're going to just give Danya a pass. For those that are tuning in and this is your first time on DocLive.tv, I welcome you. And just to give you some background information, the DocLive.tv is organized and owned by the Doc Bookshop. The Doc Bookshop is located in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. It is a large full-service bookstore. They have in-store events and sell a lot of books from every genre. And we also have sections in the store from personal care to home care and just different events that we host at the store. So if you're in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, please check out the Doc Bookshop. I have a very special guest today. His book just released, Sibling Rivalry. I got it. Woo! I have my guest today is Hal Phillips. He is an American author, journalist, and media executive known for his work in soccer, golf, travel writing. Based in Maine, he has contributed to major outlets such as ESPN, Sports Illustrated, and Soccer America. Oh, I think he was featured on Soccer. His book was featured on Soccer America recently, but we'll get into that later. I think they just released their library showcase, and he was one of the featured books. And also, he brings a deep understanding of global sports culture shaped by his own background as a competitive soccer player. He is the author of Generation Zero, Founding Fathers, Hidden Histories, and the Making of Soccer in America, and most recently, Sibling Rivalry, and his works that explore the evolution of the dynamics of soccer in the United States and around the world. Y'all give us a pass if we say soccer, okay? In addition to his writing, Phillips is the founder of media consulting firm and has worked as an editor, podcast host, and digital strategist. And we welcome him to the DocLive.tv for this very special conversation as we prepare for FIFA World Cup 2026. And guess what, you guys? Dallas Stadium in Arlington, Texas is holding the most matches. 9 matches is going to be held in this area. And I am honored to just be kicking this off with my segment, which is bringing authors and telling the world of soccer through a literary lens. Welcome, Hal Phillips. Thank you so much for being on this show and working with us and just being involved in this idea of focusing on authors tied to the sport of football in this series. I don't know if in the past, if they've really done a series up until the World Cup that says, hey, we want to hear about those communities. We want to dive into those different cities that host the MLS, that host different soccer events. And so that's what we're doing here today is diving into the world of soccer for fans and for new fans. The United States hasn't had majority of the fans, so we're bringing on new fans, and with your help I think we're going to achieve a lot more results in terms of bringing fans into the world of soccer, into the FIFA World Cup. We haven't had it in the United States since, what was it, 1994?
That's right.
1994. So to start off the conversation, well, welcome. Share a little bit more about Hal Phillips and how he got involved in soccer.
Well, thanks for having me, Danya. First of all, it's great fun to talk folks about soccer and help this book sell a little bit, to hype this event that's coming. It's certainly going to be interesting. There's a lot going on between the hosts at FIFA, the hosts here in the United States. But I'm a historian sort of by trade. I'm a journalist, I'm an author, but I love history. So I really like writing about how we got here as a soccer nation because I'm 60 years old and I grew up in the 70s and everyone kept saying this is the sport of the future. This is going to happen. It's going to be huge. And it was darkest before the dawn in the 80s when I was actually playing the game at the highest level. There was no MLS. There was no NASL. There was nothing. The game wasn't on TV. It had absolutely no cultural cachet. And basically, in the course of 10 years, that all changed. And I started writing about the game because I realized soccer had made it. And I wanted to know when it happened because I live here. I follow the game. And that was the story behind my first book. This book was really about the rivalry that we have right under our noses and really shaped the soccer community in this country as much as anything else did. And no one had ever really written about what is one of the best rivalries on earth. And certainly the most complicated, contentious, codependent rivalry in world soccer. So seeing as we're co-hosting this World Cup that's happening in less than 100 days, why not let people know what I found out? I got a PhD in the subject over the last 2 years, researching it and writing it. And I'm pleased with the book, and I hope people like it.
Oh, I've started reading it, and I am just all into the history, that work that you put into it. But before we jump off, I want to talk about. There's a lot of news going on in soccer right now. I just cannot start this show off without at least acknowledging all the news that's going on, especially with AFCON, especially with the controversy right now, where Senegal won AFCON 1-0. But just recently, yesterday, they turned it over and gave it to Morocco for over 3 months. They've been looking at the details when Senegal walked off the field because of I think it was a bar challenge. They challenged it and then they did not like the results and walked off the field. But it took them to deliberate 3 months and then come back and say, no, we're going to give the win to Morocco. What are your feelings or sentiments about that whole thing between Morocco and Senegal that's taking over the airwaves?
Well, as it happened, I dropped, whatever it cost to get Fubo TV for a month just to watch that tournament because I really wanted to see some African football up close. It was, billed as sort of the best tournament they had, in store for several iterations. So I watched a ton. I watched the entire knockout phase. I saw a bunch of group phases and just summing up what happened in that final is going to be hard. But basically Senegal scored in overtime. They had a goal They had that goal taken away. Morocco was given a penalty in overtime. Didn't look like it was a penalty, but the Senegal team was so upset they actually left the pitch for about 10 minutes. And Sadio Mane convinced them to come back. The penalty was saved, and they went to penalties to decide the game, the match, the final. And Senegal prevailed. And this was not popular in the moment because the game was held in Morocco. The whole tournament was. The fans were going crazy. The press was going crazy, objecting. And over the course of 57 days, they examined and fought and discussed what they should do in response. They fined Senegal $1 million, but that wasn't enough. They took the crown away from them yesterday. So I really can't believe that Morocco pushed this point. I think it makes them look really bad. I think it makes the Confederation of African Football, the CAF, look even worse. And I can't imagine more of a downer for African football going into this World Cup. They thought that this tournament being held really up until the final, it was as good a tournament as you're going to have. It ran like a clock. The stadiums they built were beautiful. The pitches were spectacular shape. The quality of football was very high. And it's all, I don't know, tainted now. I mean, what do you think? This is not, I can't believe this decision was rendered because it makes absolutely no one look good.
I think it's a tragedy.
Yeah,
I really think, especially when you see the fans. When you think of soccer, football, um, the whole country is wrapped in the sport. It is, you know, the whole country is a part of it. It's not parents going to see, their student play. It's the whole country that is hurting behind this. And it is the whole country that celebrated when they won the calf. And
hmm
to see that, you know, there's a lot of challenging in a lot of nations, right? Especially in Africa. And to have everybody to be on one accord when it comes to a sport is a tremendous overcoming. And I cannot imagine the fans just, in a whole bunch of things going on. This is our victory. This is
Well,
our statement for Africa. What other teams in Africa? You have Tunisia, you have Morocco, you have South Africa, you have Ghana, and it was Senegal, um, which the Senegal represents, quote unquote. When you look at Africa, it represents Black Africa. So it was a
sure.
win for those African nations that identify with the Senegalese um, culture. And I,
Well,
and I just and I just say that Morocco's going to host this in 4 years. That sentiment is going to stick. I don't know what it looks like for the future. I believe it's going to be an arbitration. Um, Senegal is going to respond to this decision, but I don't know how that happens in the World Cup because I thought they were seated in the World Cup, but I guess I was wrong. They were not seated. I guess that was a delay or until the results or the
no,
handout came.
it doesn't affect the tournament that's taking place here in June, starting in June at all. But like you said, this does plant a very big seed in the head of FIFA, saying this is the outfit that's going to be co-hosting the World Cup come 2030. I mean,
Yes.
it was supposed to be a cooperative effort, with Portugal and Spain, and they're going to be holding tournament games in South America at the same time. This whole idea of soccer bringing regions and continents and the world together, man, that idea is under attack right now. Let's put it in a larger context. You have this going down with the African nations, with Morocco and Senegal. You have the Iranian team um, basically
Oh,
being told that they can't be protected in this country despite guarantees of visas and security, by the Trump administration, which is something that I wrote about a lot in the book because my deadline was May 2025. Even in January 2025, people were worried that this outfit was not going to be able to take care of the American business of hosting this event. So there's that, controversy happening. I mean, you're trying to you're trying to paint soccer as a uniting force, and these happenings aren't helping. And of course, there's a war started, in the Middle East, by the host nation, which Vladimir Putin didn't even do ahead of the World Cup that Russia hosted in 2018. So it's a very interesting time for international soccer, and it couldn't be more eventful.
and you mentioned Iran. I also want to say in Venezuela that
Yeah,
a number of people pulled out, canceled their tickets when United States, um, I don't want to say invaded, took care of international business.
that's that's putting it mildly, Tanya. But sure, say whatever
Yes,
you want.
that's a euphemism that said handling international business.
Yeah.
That kind of. So we have all this international movement going on, and I sit back and think like I'm surprised. This must be something serious because Trump is a business person, and he knows that there's a lot of investment going on with the World Cup and the United States holding a lot of different matches across the country. Well, Houston, California, Kansas City. I think one of the matches in Philadelphia in the final, what in New Jersey, I can't remember where everything is at. But this is a lot of investment and a lot of terrain that we're covering for the World Cup. So certainly he wouldn't really put our nations and our guests at risk.
Of course
I
he
don't know.
would. No, you have to ask yourself, Dunya, and I don't have to tell you, this man operates on what's good for Donald Trump. If he's made guarantees to FIFA and Gianni Infantino, who used to be his friend, about thus or so, and all of a sudden it doesn't suit Donald Trump, it's out the window. So this is what everyone who has worked with Donald Trump, and I have a particularly unique perspective on this because I've worked in the golf business since 1992, where everybody knows you can't trust Donald Trump. If he can screw you out of something, he will do it. Because if it doesn't suit him, he won't do it. So the idea that Iran's protecting the Iranian team when it comes to this country, there's nothing in it for him. So he doesn't see any need to go out of his way to guarantee their safety. This is the kind of person that we're dealing with, and the rest of the world, knows this, and maybe the rest of the country, this one will figure it out eventually.
I guess the jury's out, and June is only like you said, it's 100 days away. What else can happen? We have Venezuela. We got, it's like it's a day to day that this international sport, this beautiful game, is just taking a lot of twists and turns.
Well, well, let's broaden it again and bring it back to you know the sibling rivalry. I mean, do you think that Morocco and Senegal are going to have a good rivalry going forward? You bet they will. The next time they meet on a field, I want to watch it because there are going to be fireworks. We just watched Venezuela beat the United States in the final of the World Baseball Classic last night. After
Mhm.
all that's gone down in the Caribbean, Venezuela comes to this country and wins the unofficial world championship of the sport that we created. Um, International sport is fascinating for those reasons, and it's fascinating for the reasons that we are grappling with here in the news. One of the things that I write about a lot in sibling rivalry is that the rest of the world has been dealing with and understanding and being entertained by international country versus country competition for a long time. It's not something that we do here. It's new to us. Soccer really introduced that idea to the United States starting in the 1990s. And there were other sports that tried to introduce before. It never really took. We're very insular here. When we say, oh, who are the rivals? Well, it's the Cowboys and the Redskins. It's the Red Sox and the Yankees. It's the Celtics and the Lakers. These are all just regions and cities. We don't have I mean, who's our most, who's our big rival in international sports? It's Mexico and soccer. And until 1990, most Americans didn't even know we had a national soccer team. This is how little Americans really took to the idea of international sport. But the U.S. Mexico rivalry introduced it to this country, and that's why it's been such an important institution in the sporting firmament that we live in today. And thank goodness that happened because we were missing out. I mean, a lot of stuff can go wrong as we're seeing today, but international competition is the most exciting competition there is because you have national identity on the line. If you think Morocco and Senegal aren't going to play tooth and nail games the next time they meet in some CAF qualifier or some World Cup qualifier, that is going to be an insane game. They're going to have to play it on a neutral field.
I was saying they're going to have to play in some other country because there's no way because there's just so much energies on both sides. But I want to take you said 19. You said a key item. 1990 it was kind of getting popularized, and when it was held in the United States in 1994,
That's right.
that brought a lot of commercialism. But I want to even take it back beyond that. In 1980, you mentioned, I think you were saying you were playing, and we want to jump into that. 1980, when United States beat, if I understand, the United States beat Mexico
Right.
2-1, and there was not a lot of talk about that because that was a big thing because they hadn't beat them since what? I think in your book you mentioned 46 years since
Mhm.
1934. United States have not beaten Mexico, and then they beat them in 1980. What I can't 2-1,
Yep.
and there was not hardly a mentioning of that. And in your book, you said there wasn't a mention, but hey. they talked about the Philadelphia Eagles winning Super Bowl 25. I'm like, oh my gosh, he hit that on the nail right there. That was like like how do we come disconnected? And this is what this series I hope, because I see it as a beautiful game. And the more and more I dive into the stories of young people becoming going to school behind the sports and becoming making it professional,
Mhm.
and how their culture is wrapped around the sport, um, from politics to economics. I'm like, this is truly why this has become a beautiful game. And I talk to, you know, other sports fans, like, why do y'all not watch this sport? And they said, Danya, this sport they play 90 minutes, and sometimes they don't even score. It'll be 0-0 or 0-1. And I said, yeah, I said it's. They said it's so slow, but I come to learn. I pose this question all the time, and the answer is it's not. You cannot look at it for the sport is deeper than that. When we're watching it, we're watching all kind of different strategies. We've learned this sport. What is your take on introducing or getting the Americans, bringing on new fans to the sport?
Well, I think we've never had more fans than we have right now. I think in this respect, we're on a great trajectory. But when I grew up, I was born in 1964, and I played youth soccer in the 70s. No one even knew enough to coach the teams. We had dads coaching the teams who had never played soccer before. So that was the level of knowledge and interest in the game. It's always been an outsider sport. And one of the reasons why, I think the major reason why, is that it's always been considered a foreign sport played by foreigners who just happen to live in this country. So it was automatically behind the eight ball in that respect. And one of the reasons that we felt that way was that Mexico was a soccer power in this hemisphere, and they beat us twice every World Cup cycle, like clockwork. And people said, well, that can't be a very good game. We can't even beat Mexico at it. And that's why the dynamic is so fascinating. You have in every other respect, United States dominates North America and dominates the relationship with Mexico, except for this one area where Mexico dominated the United States. It's the reason Mexico loves soccer so much. All sorts of South American countries love soccer, but they don't have a chance to beat up on Brazil consistently the way Mexico beat up on this country for 50 years before we finally figured out how to play them. So that aspect of it is fascinating to me, and it should be fascinating to people who watch, sports in this country. But if you're a sports fan like I am, and you're an American, you're a U.S. citizen, I should say. That word is a little general, as Bad Bunny told us at Super Bowl halftime. Um, if you love sports in this country, it's all about cities and regions and states against other cities and regions and states. We don't go and play anybody in American football. They don't even play football outside this country. Basketball in 1992, the Dream Team, finally, people are like, oh, this is really fun. And everyone who loves soccer is like, what, are you kidding me? This is how it works. You have a domestic competition like the NBA, and then you go play other teams in the Olympics and the World Championships, and you play country versus country. I don't know why Americans stick to the regionalism, the insular domestic nature of our sports culture. We are making progress in breaking that down. World Cups really help. FIBA World Basketball Championships really help. The Olympics help. We seem to get into that, but then we forget about it for 4 years. I think soccer is now, past hockey as the fourth major sport in this country. So I think we are making progress, Danya. But it's definitely fourth. It's in terms of people with casual cultural interest in soccer, it's coming along. The World Cup is going to help. But until we convince people that there's a world outside of the United States where the United States can play Cuba, can play Japan in baseball, and we can care about it and have real rivals doing it, we're cheating ourselves, and we're also not growing those sports like we could.
How you just threw another monkey wrench is you said Cuba, and Cuba's on the front line now.
Yeah, I know.
I hope it does. That is just, and do not mess with Cuba because people love soccer. Football is big in Cuba, And so we just don't need any other entity to throw a monkey wrench in the FIFA World Cup because I'm
Well,
very excited.
I didn't want to jinx us, but for a long time, one of the things I did in the book was I talked to a rivalry scholar, this guy named Joe Cobbs, who um, teaches at the University of Northern Kentucky. Fascinating guy, and really made the book and really that much more interesting because he talks about rivalry like he's been studying it for 20 years because he has. And I asked him, I said, well, who are the American rivals when it comes to international sports? And he's like, we don't really have anybody other than Mexico. We play Canada now in hockey, and that's become a thing just in the last 5 or 10 years. But why in the world did we not have a rivalry with Cuba in the game that we invented, baseball? Why do
Mhm.
we not have a rivalry with Japan? Their best players play in Major League Baseball now. Why aren't we making the World Baseball Classic a legitimate, quadrennial world championship? I hope we will, because that was pretty good theater last night. Venezuela coming back and winning that game. I mean, what a show! And hats off to them. They earned it. And the United States is disappointed, but there'll be another one, and we get a chance. Like we say in Sibling Rivalry, there's always an opportunity for revenge in sport.
And I am waiting for our baseball opener. I'm a sports connoisseur, so I just go. Sometimes I don't even know a lot of stuff that's going on, but I just love the energy around sports. And
Mm-hmm.
there's a FC game this weekend, this Saturday, that they're giving me tickets to, so I might just do that as well. So I'm all over the place when it comes to sports. But I
Yeah.
just want to take time to like reset the room and let everybody know that we're on Hal Phillips. We're dealing with the Road to the Cup literary series. This is probably our or fourth conversation, and he has his book Sibling Rivalry. I got my copy, and you could go to the docbookshop.com and get your copy as well. Also, I do want to just shout out some of these comments. We have some excited fans. So, well, the Doc Bookshop, of course. And there's G and J Training. I had my son in soccer because it's the future for the U.S. Love this conversation. Rivalry energy is great for soccer. I agree about the international competition sentiment Hal has. And it's a lot of progress. My son told me he's prepping to play the Premier League. So
Mm.
this is kind of local soccer, but that's the beauty of it. The local soccer create that energy. Because I remember having a conversation about Madrid,
Mhm.
Madrid football, and how aggressive it is in Madrid before it even get to the national. Just within the city construct, Madrid is so aggressive. By the way, they think I asked somebody who they think was going to be in the finals. They said it was going to be Spain and Argentina, but we'll jump into that conversation towards the end. I want to just start more into your book. Um, what inspired you to explore? You touched on it a little bit, just to explore deeply in the U.S. Mexico soccer rivalry at this moment, at this time, especially leading up to the 26th FIFA World Cup.
When I wrote my first book, Generation Zero, you really can't talk about the explosive growth of soccer in America from 1970 to the end of the century without talking about the U.S. Mexico rivalry. There were a lot of things going on that grew the game that were super interesting. And part of that book is not autobiographical, but I was sort of there, at a bunch of key moments playing with guys who ended up being on the national team. And so it was sort of that kind of book. But I wrote in the book, if any publisher ever wants to do a U.S. Mexico rivalry book, I would be very happy to do that because I don't think that we understand how fortunate we are to have such a great neighbor in Mexico and such a rival of such a complicated rival in Mexico. So Bloomsbury, the publisher, bought that book. I pitched it to them formally, and they agreed. They said this is an underreported subject. It's an interesting way to talk about the world game ahead of the World Cup, and really, what I think is the most interesting thing about the book and the rivalry is that the rivalry is so rich and so complicated and so broad And yet Mexico and the United States in the last 50 years have really built a North American football organism, a culture that they share. The two pro leagues now, you know, they cooperate with each other. They're partners in a lot of ways. With the League's Cup that they put on, they stopped their season to hold this tournament together. You got both nations basically training up and then competing to sign the best talented players in the United States that are dual nationals. Mexico is in there putting them on their under 15 team, and our team is putting them on the under 17 U.S. national team. These are the same kids. They could play for either country. We share them. We share so much now that didn't exist, in 1985. It's fascinating to me how far it's come. And
we share Messi. Messi is playing in Miami, and he plays for Argentina. So
Exactly. I mean, one of the things that is, I think, hard for American sports fans to understand is that there is this whole other world of international competition that exists in addition to, the clubs and teams that they support, in the NBA and the NFL and Major League Baseball. So it's club and country. And, Messi is now part of the organism. He's part of the North American soccer culture, and that's great. He brings an amazing energy to that in a million ways we talk about. I saw you have Paul Tenorio coming on later to talk about his book, which I'm sure is excellent. But Messi goes home and has to deal with his national team, and they have their own rivalries in South America, and they have an incredible impact on the way we think about soccer internationally. One of the things that I learned in reporting this book, and I do feel like when you write a book, you get sort of a PhD in the subject because you think about nothing else and study nothing else for 2 years and then write about it for nothing else for 2 years. It's a lot. But one of the things I didn't know that I learned was that Mexican soccer culture, they are so impressed with Argentina. They're so impressed, not just with the teams, the skill, the fact that they win so much. They believe that Argentinians are sort of badass, and they respect them for that. And I think the Mexicans, who are famously polite people, they sort of feel like they need that badass edge that the Argentinians have. And they would love to be rivals with Argentina. But Argentina, they're too good for them. And Argentina knows it, and the Mexicans know it. The Mexicans are our rival for reasons of geography and culture that you can't escape. But Argentina is a huge force in our hemisphere with regard to who wins, but also how people behave. And the thing about Argentina, if you look at them from outside of Mexico in a purely sort of objective way, they're jerks. They know how to get under someone's skin. Their fan culture is very aggressive and misogynistic and nasty. And they think it gives them an edge, and Mexico thinks they give them an edge. And one of the things that I learned when I went to Guadalajara last October to watch the U.S. play Mexico was the Mexican people are a little nervous that we've hired an Argentinian to coach us. And Mauricio Pochettino is a different sort of cat. And they're very impressed with the fact that we were able to sign him. And they wouldn't be surprised if he takes us to new heights because he's Argentinian, he's accomplished, and they respect the Argentinians. Love them or hate them, they win.
I think I've sat down and watched Argentina. They just seem to be so tactical, and just strategic. And I'm fascinated with how they're playing. And I think the last go around, I want they were playing Mudapi. What was it? France and Argentina was playing, and I fell in love with Mubapi. I know I'm massacring his name. Mubapi, his father's a coach.
Mbappe. There you go.
And I was fascinated seeing them two play, compete. And if I remember correctly, it was France and Argentina, right?
Yep.
Yes.
And but it's interesting, Danya, because France and Argentina played in the last World Cup. When Argentina won the Copa America in Miami a year in 2024, they beat Uruguay in that match, but they were taunting the French after that match. They were taunting 2 years after winning the World Cup and beating France. They were singing songs about France, making fun of them. They know how to get under somebody's skin. The next time that those two teams play, it's going to be like Senegal and Morocco. It's going to be a crazy war. But one of the things that people think about when they think about Mexican soccer is, calling the opposing goalkeeper puto. The sort of, they call it desmadre in Mexico. It means motherless, but someone who's motherless doesn't know how to behave. It's bad behavior. It's chaos. The Argentinians invented this, and the Mexicans do it because they think it's going to help them win like Argentina. So it's a full-time job. Desmadre, a team like is trolling France 2 years after beating them. That's how seriously they take it in Argentina. They're extremely difficult opponents. No one likes them because they're jerks, but they beat you as well.
Well, they said they're factoring producing. They've said who's going to be the next one. I think they talked about Diego Maradona, and Lionel Messi. This is probably his last go around. But who's going to be that next to take on that torch? That's just something I think the world is kind of waiting to see. And they've always compared him to Maradona. So I think who's next? Because they said this is going to be the last one for Messi.
Well, as recently as 2022, October 2022, before the World Cup started in Qatar, people were complaining that Messi couldn't win, that he couldn't win a World Cup. He had been to 3 or 4 of them. They'd never gotten past, the big hurdle. They'd lost the final in 2014. And it's amazing how quickly these things change. Now they're unbeatable. Now they're like, well, who's going to be the next Messi to lead Argentina? No one knows who's going to win a World Cup from tournament to tournament, and no one can say, oh, because they have Messi, they will win. He had never won until 2022, and he's an old man. That's one of the things that makes this tournament so incredible. One of the things that is true is that we don't know who's going to win, but one of the things that is also true is that only 7 or 8 teams have ever won it. It's very hard to win a World Cup, and there are great footballing nations that have never won a World Cup, like the Netherlands. They've been in 3 finals. They've never won. And there's been many, many, many great teams that have never won. And all you can do is watch and appreciate what you're watching. I love the French team. I think they're going to be good for a long time. But I would pay to watch Argentina play France again at this World Cup. That would be quite a matchup. I'd have to explore the bracket to see that happens. You can't quite tell.
Well, tell Spain that, because they seem to believe that it's going to be Spain and Argentina.
I'm sure that's possible. They do rig is a strong word. They do organize the tournament so that if things fall correctly, you have a Western Hemisphere team versus a European team, ideally in the final, because those are the best. Those are where the best teams are, and you don't want an all European final. You don't want an all South American final. You want that cross Atlantic frisson. So I'm sure that's possible. My pick for the tournament is Portugal. I think Portugal is one of the great footballing nations that hasn't won, and I think they are just loaded. I think Cristiano Ronaldo is going to get hurt again, and they'll win without him, which will make me happy.
Yeah, they said it's probably his last season too.
Definitely.
But we did in the past had a conversation about Portugal, and most of Portugal. This is weird. This is a weird conversation, but they said most of Portugal's success have been able to get African soccer players, and they no longer have that access. So it's more of a migration that happened that they have African Portuguese that have seeded their team and is helping to make them successful. And that's because and they're having that conversation throughout Europe that a lot of the success is coming from African players. Whether or not that's true, that remains to be discussed. But I know even on the Spanish team, a high percentage are African players or of African.
That's true. That's true, and I think even in a place like Portugal that has not been a colonial power for a long time, there's still connections and families that stretch from Portugal to Angola, for example. And you have people who, like they have in France, where perhaps the parents were born in Cameroon, and they raise their children outside of Paris,
Exactly.
and they have a
Yeah.
choice. They have a choice to play for one team or the other. Of course, no one has a situation like the United States and Mexico has. We have 50 million Mexican Americans living in this country, and a I think the U.S. Soccer Federation told me that at any one time there are 200 dual nationals in the youth system that the United States operates. Um, there's another 100 in the Mexican youth situation. And one of the things that all those players have to do at some point is decide. They have to choose whether they're going to represent Mexico, which is the country of their parents, or the United States, which is where they have lived their whole lives. And that situation isn't specific to the US and Mexico, but there aren't 50 million Cameroonians living in France. It's a much larger dynamic in this country, and it's a lot more nuanced and complicated because these people send money back and forth. They travel back and forth. They have family all over the United States and all over Mexico, and the pressure on these players is quite dramatic. We talk about it a lot in the book because it's one of the things that makes the rivalry so spicy.
Yes, yeah, let's talk about that some more because you did mention that a lot in the book, and you talk about I believe, how immigration, how border dynamics had, how have the shared cultural values have shaped what happens on that soccer field. Because in a sense, you got those overlapping, those dual participation, dual citizenships where they can go either way. How what happens on the soccer field? Like how does that play out in the concept of sibling rivalry?
Well, it happened. The dynamics are literally a hundredfold. There's so many. I mean, when I talked to Landon Donovan, actually, I didn't talk to Landon, but I read several interviews of his, and he talked about this specifically when he was growing up in Redlands, California. He gravitated naturally to all the Mexican American club teams that played against him. And he's like, I want to play with those guys. They know how to play. He's bilingual. And he did end up playing with the best club teams from in Southern California that weren't from Redlands. They were from other communities that were far more Mexican American influenced. So you have that dynamic where generally that soccer is better. So our best players are drawn to those clubs, to those collegiate programs when people were going to collegiate programs. So there's that going on. But I think one of the coolest things is you have players, and I'm going to talk about women's soccer here for a moment. You talk about fans who follow the U.S. women's national team, young Latinas who are raised, who've been raised to be soccer fans, but they love the U.S. women's national team because they're world champions. They're also fighting for equal pay and women's rights and feminism. The women's national team from Mexico is starting to get good, and they actually beat the U.S. In 2024 in a CONCACAF Gold Cup match. And these young women were just gobsmacked by this. They were like, "Oh, there's a national team in Mexico. I'm Mexican American. Why am I not rooting for them?" So they are pulled in both directions by ambition, if you will, in supporting a team that will challenge for a World Cup every time they play in one, or their heritage and trying to support, Mexican women's football, which is
Mhm.
growing and they're getting a lot better. I mean,
Right.
there are a million ways to slice it up. I think you see migration, migration is what this country is about. One of the things that is, really important to Mexicans, and I'm talking about Mexican nationals here who live in Mexico, is that there's this assumption that life is better when you go north. Someone like Rafa Marquez, who is the heir apparent to coach the national team, star player for Barcelona and the Mexican national team for 20 years. And his grandfather left to go north to work in the United States, never came back. His,
Wow.
his grandson has never forgiven him. And it has colored the way that he thinks about migration to this day. He will never, work in the United States. He played 2 years in MLS, hated it, never doing it again. So it affects everything about our soccer culture. But again, this is a soccer culture that Mexicans and Americans share. We send as many kids to play in Mexico as Mexicans come and play in MLS now. So we are sharing these two leagues that play right next to each other, that compete against each other in all these different tournaments. It used to be we never saw a Liga MX game in this country. We never had them on TV. Now they're all over TV. So migration affects everything that happens on the soccer field in this country, whether it's club teams, but definitely the national teams.
I'm trying to find that passage where you said that it was competitive and codependent.
Ah,
The rivalry was, you know, is that what you're talking about when you say it's competitive and codependent amongst each other? Is that
yes. And let me give you an example of why I use that word specifically. When you're talking about rivalry in a vacuum, you can't have a rivalry without a rival. And Mexico had a specific kind of rival in the United States up until 1980. They had a rival that they knew they could beat, and they liked that. They knew they could dominate the United States in soccer, and that made up for the fact that the United States dominated them in other ways that they didn't like. But by the same token, you can't really have a proper rivalry where there's some doubt about who's going to win the match without a competent foil. And the United States finally turned itself into that competent foil in the early 90s. So while there was a rivalry between the U.S. and Mexico since 1934, it wasn't until 1990 that they actually had a proper competition where the result was in doubt. And we, as Americans, loved it more because, hey, now we can beat Mexico. This is fun. We get and we love international competition. For a while there, the Mexicans weren't sure they loved it because they enjoyed kicking our ass time and time again. But there was sort of a breaking point for them in 2002 when we kicked them out, when we beat them and booted them from the 2002 World Cup. That whole event landed like a trauma for Mexican soccer fans. But to their credit, they rose to the occasion. And now they know they're in a proper rivalry where every time out, there's something at stake. Their emotional identity as Mexicans is at stake in a way that it should be in a rivalry. And so in that way, we are dependent on Mexico for the existence of this rivalry, and they are dependent on us. And that's how it should work. Argentina needs Brazil to test themselves, when in a World Cup qualifier. They don't play as often as the United States, and that's one of the reasons, and Mexico, and that's one of the reasons I think our rivalry is different and better in many ways. But you need that kind of symmetry to make a rival work, and without it, you're just winning all the time, and that's not as interesting for anyone.
Like we keep going back to this new rivalry that's going to come up between Morocco and Senegal. That's going to be huge.
Well, I hadn't thought about it. You brought it up. We're coming on to talk about U.S. Mexico, but this just happened, and I was reading about it myself, and all I could think of was, oh my God, these two teams are going to play each other at some point, and it's going to be a bloodbath.
Oh my God. I can't even make this up. It was so. I said this conversation is so timely. Like I think it was a reason because we put it off for a week, and I think just to get this information to talk about it, really, this is another rivalry. But I want we're talking about that rivalry, but let's look at it as the evolution of a rivalry. We're living in a real time evolution of a rivalry, and you note that rivalry wasn't always equal, and for us it changed in the 1990s. You talked about throughout our conversation, how has the growth of soccer in the United States impacted the dynamics with Mexico?
Well, we're finally good enough to play them as equals.
Right. Yeah.
And that just wasn't true until 1990. And when you are equals and we have a league that is pretty much as good as theirs, all of a sudden, Mexican players might choose to play in the United States the same way that United States players have chosen to play south of the border for quite some time if they want to play a better brand of soccer and maybe get paid more. That's not true anymore. Now we have this equality of competition and skill that is just way more fun. But one of the things that we talk about in the book a lot is, there are specific emotions that go into a rivalry. And I think this is something that Americans can relate to is, I'm a Red Sox fan. I'm from Boston. So I'm a masshole, bred and, raised, born and bred in Massachusetts. So I'm a Red Sox fan and we're rivals with the Yankees, right? Well, the Yankees kicked our ass for 100 years, 85 years. We couldn't beat them. And we still hated them.
Mm-hmm.
But those emotions, when it's lopsided, are quite specific and important to understand when you're trying to understand how rivalries work. We envied the Yankees. We envied their skill. We envied all the World Series. The Yankees, they didn't envy anything about the Red Sox. They only had scorn for us. They looked down on us. In fact, scorn is silent. When you scorn somebody, you don't really even think about them. You are not worried about them. So scorn is silence. So that's the way rivalries often work. And that's the way our rivalry with Mexico worked until we gained parity. And that changed the whole dynamic. Now you have envy and scorn going in both directions. I think Americans still envy, the culture that soccer fans in America envy, the soccer culture that they have in Mexico. They don't have these conversations, Danya, about learning how to love this or figuring out how to grow the game. In Mexico, it's number one, and they love it. Everyone loves it. It's on TV all the time. We envy that. And, of course, we also, scorn them as the big brother in the geopolitical relationship that we have with Mexico. There, it's just the opposite. I think they envy our power geopolitically, and they scorn us for a long time for being bad at soccer and not loving it enough. Now I think they just say we don't love it like they do because we are as good as them. So you have the envy and the scoring going both ways in international soccer, which is powerful. I should say that it's unique in international soccer to have that kind of complicated dynamic of envy and scorn. In Portugal and Spain, for example, you'd say, oh, they have great rivalry. They don't. They never play each other. They avoid it at all costs. My editor, Esteban, who's the reason there's so much good Spanish language in this book, used properly because he's the man. He taught. And let me finish. Spain and Portugal are two nations that live back to back. That's the saying. They, of course, are neighbors, but they don't share. They don't have a tournament between the two professional leagues in those countries. They don't share a culture. They have distinct cultures. They speak different languages. They have nothing to do with each other unless they have to play each other. That's the difference. Mexico and the United States have broken that barrier. We're now custodians of a single soccer ecosystem, and that is rare in world of football, and that makes our rivalry way more complicated and codependent than Brazil and Argentina, Portugal and Spain, Germany and Holland, all the great rivalries. Senegal and Morocco, they don't share anything. There's nothing going on between those two until they have to play, and then it's a game. But our situation is different because of that closeness.
And I want to say you brought up Spain and Portugal. I do believe in studying Spain and football in Spain. They are their own rivalries. Like you have Barcelona and Madrid. Like they can't even look outside because it is so deep within the construct of their country.
Yeah.
They can't even look out. They can't even appreciate the Spain and Portugal because they have it so deep within themselves. I don't know. It just gets weird, and I don't think we had that. I think Mexico may get it a little muy poquito, within Mexico, but they have to look at the bigger picture when you in the United States. And I don't know where Canada is in the midst of all of this.
Every country,
Canadians.
Every country has to reckon these relationships between clubs and country. There's rivalries that are domestic, and then there's rivalries that are international. Spain has incredible rivalries with France and Italy, especially. And what does that mean? That means that they want to beat them more than they want to beat or even play Portugal. They have something to prove when they beat Italy. The Spanish don't feel like beating Portugal proves anything. They don't need to prove anything. to Portugal. But they have those dynamics, just not with the country next to them. And there's a reason why that is. They're too close. They're too proud to give each other credit for being their primary rival. They won't do it, and they'll never do it.
I know we're up against the hour. I know, but we haven't gotten into one of my questions. Is I really got to know which player or story stayed with you the most and why. And I do want to you have certain pictures in the book as well. And you guys, y'all just gonna have to get the book because these are interesting kinds of. I don't even know, just interesting.
Oh, that's Graham Susie, who scored a big goal against Panama to basically get the Mexicans into the 2014 World Cup. And the Mexicans turned around and sainted him. He's now San Susie in Mexico. There he is.
And that's what makes it right. And so you guys, that's some amazing. I could really be on the phone. On the phone. I could really have this conversation for probably 2 hours. But I did ask that question on which player's stories stay with you the most and why.
If I had to pick one, I would pick, when you're writing a book, you got to throw personalities in. So it's not just game stories and talking to rivalry experts from this college or that college. The guy that fascinates me is Bora Milutinovic, who is a Serb, from the old Yugoslavia, showed up in Mexico to play professionally there, retired, and became a coach in Mexico for Pumas. And he had such great success there that he was named the Mexican national team coach in 1983, and he led them to a very successful 1986 World Cup in Mexico. And he really became a sainted figure in Mexico because he did such a good job. Well, in 1991, the U.S. Federation hired him to coach the United States. And that is not, I can't believe it's a coincidence that when he showed up, all of a sudden we graduated to equality with Mexico. That's really when the modern rivalry begins, when Bora became our coach and turned to the players and said, you're better than them. You're going to beat them. And we did. And it shows that it's a lot up here. But Bora was such an incredible person. He went back and coached Mexico again after that. But he did something else important. He showed that there's a portal between the two countries in soccer that we didn't know existed. Back then, nobody who was raised in the United States played for Mexico. Nobody who was, who coached the national team in Mexico came and coached this country national team. He created that crossover, that trans-border dynamic. Now it's commonplace. There's hundreds of players that were born in this country and play their professional soccer in Mexico and vice versa. Mm-hmm. And he showed us how it worked. So I think Bora is a really interesting guy. He's also just hilarious to listen to him talk. They say he's unintelligible in 5 different languages. He's just a really hilarious guy who everyone manages to love, even though he did this very controversial thing. But I think his influence, we're still feeling it today, and we owe him a debt of gratitude.
I want to say we talked, and thank you for sharing that story. We talked about, the club, the country, but we talked about just a human connection. But how do you see the athletes? How does the rivalry embody the athlete on a personal level? How does that, emotional weight how do they respond to the emotional weight of a rivalry?
Well, everyone who was an athlete eventually was a fan first. So they come at it like we do. But one of the things that comes out when you talk to players and when you read the archives and the interviews with players over the course of decades is that there's absolutely nothing to be gained in a professional sporting capacity by underestimating your opponent. And it's clear from looking at the contemporary press reports in the early 90s that the Mexican players, the professionals on the national team, on El Tri, they knew that the United States had made a huge leap. And they tried to make it clear to the media people in Mexico and to their fans that things had changed. But Mexicans did not want to hear that. And they did not want to give up their superiority. And they kept on just sort of exhorting their team to play harder and to return us to this position of dominance. But the players knew first, and I thought that was fascinating, is that they want to beat, the Mexican
Mhm.
players want to beat the US players just as bad as they always did. All the cultural pressure and um, all that, all that, all that ritual that they see around them and grew up with, it didn't go away. But what they turned into were realists. They're like, this team is really good, and we're not going to just blow them out anymore. And y'all better understand that, or else it's going to be really difficult. And it took Mexico 10 years to really accept the idea that we were good enough to be their rival. They didn't even call in Mexico, they don't call it a rivalry, they call it a clásico. And that's their word. And they didn't use that word to describe the US Mexico rivalry for a long time. But after 2002, when we kicked them out of the World Cup, they started using it. They understood that we had earned it. But I thought it was fascinating that the players in Mexico understood that before anyone else in Mexico did. That was interesting to me.
I know I don't want to keep, and we're over an hour, but I do want people to go to the website. I need to put the link in the website where people can go pick up your book, and we are going to have some giveaways for Family Day on April 25th. We have an actually football soccer day at the bookstore, and we're also
Oh,
going
nice.
to give. Yeah, we also have the FC Dallas. They're giving us quite a bit of items, and one of them is this. Let me pull it up. It's this woo. It's a voucher that entitles a holder to a one-time waiver of admission fees to the National Soccer Hall of Fame
Oh,
here,
cool.
and so it is growing in the Dallas Fort Worth area very well. I will be out there. No, I do not remember who we're playing on this Saturday, but I
Mm-hmm.
will be out there. I can. A couple of our players got called up into the international arena. I can't remember. It was one of. I think it was a Haitian player, and one of the Haitian players. So they're getting called up into the international clubs. I don't know how
Mm-hmm.
that exactly works, but it's all up and down Instagram. But
What about the
I do.
scarves? Are you going to send me a scarf or what?
Oh, I do have. I gotta say, did you get the Mexico? You guys, I have my scarves right now. I hate to say it. Senegal.
That's a Senegal scarf. Oh, that's a nice scarf.
I
Can I have one of
know.
those?
I know. I gotta get you one. I'll send you one. Oh
Send me
my!
one,
It's
please.
the Senegal, and then I have, of
I'm gonna
course,
get that scarf and I'm gonna go to Morocco and walk around in it. I'm gonna get myself destroyed.
I got Spain. Oh, and I got. These are all the conversations that I've had so far. So I'm probably delirious half the time because I'm in my, and I got South Africa, and I do have Mexico and the United States, but it's at the bookstore. I was so mad because I said I was going to have these scarves. All of them. I'm collecting all of them as my conversations as I grow my World Cup conversations. I collect
Mhm.
all these scarves, and I do have the Mexico scarf, you guys. I probably could show it right now, or if my business partner is listening, maybe she can share my scarf.
Mhm.
But I just think it's just another. Oh, I didn't show the most important part.
There we go. FC
Yeah,
Dallas.
FC Dallas, and I didn't even show you the other part. This most important part. You probably can't see it, but I got all this hair. But
Careful now.
you know what this is? You can't. Texas is always going to show itself.
Is that a 10-gallon hat? I can't see it in my view, so you
Oh,
better
you
stand
can't.
up.
Oh,
Oh, okay, okay, I see it now. It's a soccer ball with a 10-gallon hat. I got
So, again, Texas is its own competition within itself. So, what else can you share that we haven't discussed about your book? We haven't discussed a lot. I can do part 3, 4, or 5 with your book because it's just so loaded with history, personal accounts, and you even go into youth soccer. We didn't talk about the American Soccer League.
it.
Like, you do a lot of research that we have not even covered. And I'm telling everyone out there that's listening or that are listening in the future, this book is worth like any community conversation, any dialogue and discussion, especially as Mexico, United States, and Canada host the World Cup in 2026.
Mm-hmm.
And the rivalry that you presented, that we can really just think of dynamics. I think the rivalry is to the point that Mexico got their first, they get the first match, right? In Azteca in Mexico. I think that's the first match in North America is in Mexico.
That's the first batch of the tournament. They're hosting, and I think that's right. They've hosted 2 World Cups, and they should kick it off there. I think there are only 13 matches in Mexico. Maybe there might be more now because I think Iran has said, "Oh, we'll come to the tournament if we can play in Mexico." That happened today as well. So the news just
Oh,
keeps
I didn't
happening.
know
Yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah. So I mean, there's so much to talk about. We haven't talked about identity hardly at all. I think that Mexico has identity to burn when it comes to soccer, and we're still figuring that out. I mean, that's what happens in a melting pot. It's hard to know exactly who who you are if you're a soccer fan in the United States. You could be a Mexican descent, you could be English descent, you could be African descent. I mean, they have it easy in a small country where it's homogenous like Japan. It's very
Uh-huh.
clear who they are. Here, it takes some work. Mexicans have rallied around their idea of Mexico in the form of soccer. So I think we could learn a lot from them in that respect. So that's one thing that we didn't talk about. I have a whole chapter on identity, but it's a theme that runs through the book. There's so much great stuff. People go buy the book and read it, and then I'll come back and we'll talk about it and take questions.
Read it and have a conversation on it. I mean, you know, I think South America is the ones that deal more with identity. I mean, they're almost homogeneous right now. I don't know.
Mhm.
I think European is more of a league that have players from all over the country, the Caribbean and what have you. And so I tend to think when I see South America as more of a don't have to deal with identity as much. I don't know.
I think they do. I think they're the indigenous peoples that don't feel like they're seen uh, like folks of direct Spanish descent are seen, and Brazil deals with that. But sport sort of erases that or makes it manageable. Look at the Venezuelan baseball team. That's a team that is black and white and everything in between, and mestizo, and they're from all over, and they're going through a terrible time politically in their country. But what did they have? 60,000 people in the stands in Miami showed up to support that team, no matter who they are. They're Venezuelans. And I thought it was fascinating to see that so many Venezuelans showed up to support Venezuela against the U.S. In a game of baseball, which is our game. And we couldn't even get half the people in the stadium. I will admit that what I first thought is that people are often commenting about that when the U.S. plays Mexico in the United States. If they play the game in the Rose Bowl, they'll have 80,000, 75,000 Mexicans in the stands, and it's a problem if you want to win the game. But people think that's a soccer problem. That's a problem that the U.S. Soccer Federation has. Well, obviously, it's an American problem. It's a U.S. problem. We play a game for the World Baseball, the World Baseball Classic Championship in Miami, and we're outnumbered 10-1.
That's
So
crazy. That's crazy.
that's about identity. That's about Venezuelans who live in this country saying, "I'm going to show up and root for that baseball team because I'm a Venezuelan, and that means something." And for whatever reason, U.S. citizens don't feel that way or don't feel enough that way to go buy those tickets. And don't tell me that Americans don't have the money. So it's an interesting dynamic. I think that but it's what we talked about first. I think we're still trying to understand how international competition works when it's country versus country. We get it. We get it intellectually, but we don't get it at the gut level, at the identity level. I think the U.S. women's national team has created that kind of identity for women in this country, for sporting women. And I think the United States men's national team has done it pretty darn well, and we're getting better. But man, I mean, the baseball thing just blew me away. And I'm happy for Venezuela. They earned the victory, but I was blown away by the atmosphere in that stadium. It was really something.
That is crazy. That
Yeah.
is just it's so different. Even the makeup of the teams is just different for me. We look at even from the African American perspective, how African Americans were involved in baseball and
Mm-hmm.
how that is has diminished. It in an amazing kind of ways. Like it's almost absent. And if you do see African American, you don't really see them. I usually see them like Caribbean. I really don't see a lot of African Americans in the sport of baseball as it once was.
Well, there are plenty of Afro Caribbeans who are playing it, and they, the Dominican and everywhere in Venezuela. So, but that's a cultural thing. I think that African Americans in this country, they're playing other things. I mean, it's not like they're shut out of baseball because they can't play it like it's 1935. They're playing soccer, they're playing basketball, they're playing football, they're playing other sports. It's just not as popular amongst African Americans anymore, which sort of sucks. But so you're allowed to play what you want. It doesn't
Yeah,
make
I think I'm going to attend some baseball games this year. So I will be there and I will be attending some FC games this year. So I actually don't do much of football anymore. I
mm,
used to, I don't know, and basketball. I don't do much. I used to watch basketball, but I don't do basketball as much. I do soccer. I'm starting to do soccer a lot more. Probably because my nephew now he's a soccer player. My nephew's a soccer player, and so that's probably why I'm getting more into the sport of soccer. And I used to be a soccer coach.
there you go.
But that was like 20 years ago when I did that, so I have those, that love for the sport, in a grassroots sense. But on a
Hmm.
professional level, I think I'm really evolving and I'm excited about all these conversations that is really shaping the sport. And we can see how it plays out on the field. So I'm always excited about that. And I think these are the type of conversations that can get more fans into the sport that haven't been traditionally been about the sport and just putting some humanity behind the sport and looking at the rivalry. I think that just creates the energy in fans. We talk about country club, we talk about the athlete and the fans. I think the rivalry does something and make the fans want to come out, make the fans want to tap in. And we're all rivalry does it. And it's amazing that you capture this in this book because rivalry, which is the thing that draws the fans. I
You
think.
don't have to. You don't have to explain to a Czech, for example, why they feel like they should go watch the Czech Republic against their former, their former nation partners in Slovakia. You don't have to explain to a Czech why they want to go to a soccer game to see them play against Germany. It's a natural feeling of identity that you have when you live in a culture that expresses identity through sport, which is what everyone else in the world does but us. We're learning only now how to do it, and look out when we figure it out. But until that time, it's a bit of a puzzle as to why we have such a strong domestic sporting scene, and we call the World Series a World Series, even though it's not a world tournament at all. There is a world tournament. We should throw our weight behind it because that's double the fun. That's what I say. You're not taking away anything from Major League Baseball by having the World Baseball Classic succeed. And we know that the World Cup of soccer, grows the game in this country and will again, to MLS's benefit. So, but it's great to root for your team, your national team, to watch on TV, to go to the stadium. That's a natural human response.
Mhm,
And
mhm.
it's identity. It's like you want to see your people do well. It's very
Great.
elemental.
On that note, you guys, I put it in the chat. Get the book, and I haven't checked what's going on Facebook. I'll check that later. But get the book, Sibling Rivalry. There's a link there, and you can always go to the docbookshop.com. I truly enjoyed this conversation. I really did. Are you going to be in the Dallas Fort Worth area at all for any of the matches?
I don't plan to, but I'll make sure to drop by if and when I do. Not before. I can't believe it'll happen before the tournament. I'm traveling a ton as it is. But short answer is no. But I love Texas.
Mhm. So where are you traveling to? Where are you
I
traveling?
am gonna. My kids live in Montana, so I'm going to be going out to see them at the end of April.
Hmm.
I'm going to go to the Netherlands at right in the first week of the tournament on a golf trip. I'm do some travel writing there, but I'm going to watch the first matches in Holland, where they love their soccer. It's going to be crazy watching those games in Holland. And then I'll be in the UK in September.
Okay.
So that's another golf trip, not a soccer trip. But I'm trying to think about the last time I was in Texas. I'll be in New Orleans a year from now, but that's close to Texas. I'll probably go to Houston. I know I've got friends in Houston.
So I think as the matches go on, I'll just probably have to check you and see what's your response to this one. I think I will probably have to, as we watch it and observe, from June to what, August, um, just get your feedback,
You know where to
whatever.
find me. We'll get back on StreamYard and talk it out.
Right, right. Let's do that. But thank you so much, Hal Phillips. I truly, truly enjoyed this conversation. I can't wait to finish this book. This book is amazing and dynamic and great photos in the book. So thank you.
Thank you, Donya. I appreciate it.